Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to a pretty belated Get French Football News show. My name is Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Samuel Rooke. The cobwebs of the winter break have been truly shaken off now, and that was proven in a barn-busting Ligue 1 weekend and midweek, really, in the Coupe de France as well, culminating in that heavyweight clash on Sunday we saw. But who came out on top? You probably already know by now. And who's joining the fray in the Cup? All that and more after our latest headlines. Marseille won their fifth straight game in all competitions on Friday evening as they earned a 2-0 win away to Caen. A Dimitri Payet penalty and a Florian Thauvin strike were enough to move them into provisional second place. In Saturday's early match, Bordeaux prepared for their new manager Gus Poyet by winning 1-0 at high-flying Nantes. Nicolas de Préville netted for Les Girondins as they ushered in the Uruguayan after the game. In the multiplex, Strasbourg beat Dijon in a 3-2 thriller that saw Kenny Lala net a brace from the spot, while Toulouse sank to their 8th defeat in their last 11 Ligue 1 matches as Montpellier came from behind to win 2-1 as Maxime Gradel saw his first red card of his career, and also Pascal Duprat was shown the door. A Moussa Konate double helped Amiens get back to winning ways in a 3-1 victory over Guingamp. Troyes scored just before half-time to see off Lille 1-0, and Rennes left it late again to sneak a 1-0 win past 10-man Angers. On Sunday, Willian Cyprien returned to the score sheet as his stunning free kick helped Nice to a 1-0 victory over struggling Saint-Etienne, as Monaco eventually bundled to a 3-1 win against Metz, who had goalkeeper Eiji Kawashima sent off. In the weekend's final match, Lyon managed a 2-1 victory over leaders Paris Saint-Germain. Nabil Fekir's clever free kick early on was cancelled out by a sensational Levin Kurzawa volley just before half-time, but at the very death of the game, substitute Memphis Depay earned all 3 points with a pick of the bunch. And in midweek news, obviously, we've had Coupe de France action Tuesday, Wednesday, and this evening as well. Chambly are still in the round after beating Châteauroux on penalties after a 1-1 draw. Auxerre caused one of the upsets of the round with a really great 4-3 victory away to Nantes. The other big result was Bourg-en-Bresse, who managed to win 2-0 at home to Toulouse, while Lens beat Stade Briochin. Canet-Roussillon managed to get to penalties against Caen, but the Ligue 1 side won 4-3 in spot kicks. US Colomiers Football lost 2-1 to Sochaux, and Epinal were defeated by Marseille on Tuesday. In Wednesday's games, Montpellier played an excellent game against Lorient that ended 4-3 to the Ligue 1 side. Troyes knocked out Saint-Etienne on penalties after a 1-1 draw. Paris Saint-Germain managed to get through on a 4-2 victory over Guingamp. Metz needed penalties to get past Tours. They netted only 2 spot kicks in a round. That's an interesting one. And Lyon continued their fantastic week with an excellent 3-2 away victory to Monaco, while Strasbourg this evening have beaten Lille to head to the next round. That has a number of interesting fixtures, really, and the main one pulling from there is Sochaux will be hosting Paris Saint-Germain in what a wonderful tie that is for the Ligue 2 side, as well as another Ligue 2 side getting a big name in Bourg-en-Bresse facing Marseille. Metz will face Caen, Montpellier are taking on Lyon, Lens will take on Troyes, Chambly will take on Grandvier, Auxerre will face Herbier, and Grenoble will face Strasbourg. And that's all for a bumper news section. But to stay up to date with everything French football news, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week in where else but Lyon, where second overcame first in a titanic bout. It was a fantastic game full of talking points and quite sublime goals, really, Adam. But in this one, Lyon really proved that they can hang with the big boys in there.
Yeah, I think they did. It was a really it was an even game. I really felt like Lyon deserved something from the encounter. It it kind of, the way the game played out did kind of play in their favour, of course, with the sending off, and the early goal, the sort of the fantastic Fekir free kick that really caught Areola out, and really gave them that sort of momentum that they needed. But I think if you look at the top four sides in France this season, and we hoped Monaco would be able to keep pace, and I don't think that they've proven that they can keep pace with PSG again this season. Obviously, I would put them in as the fourth best side. I think Lyon proved last year when they beat Marseille, they're superior to Marseille. So Lyon are France's second best team at the moment after PSG, obviously, and they're on 8 points now. So I know that I don't think they're going to catch PSG by any means, but they're going to keep them honest for a long, long time. And yeah, I think it's proved not only can Lyon mix it with the big boys in France, of which they are one, but they could do in Europe with this team. This sort of revamped team of Tolisso and Lacazette leaving, and players that are coming and have done really, really well. And Genesio, who I have had little faith in for a long time, has really proven this season that he's capable of moulding an effective unit and an exciting attacking team. And I think probably that's the most surprising aspect of this sort of Lyon resurgence this season. Not only did they have to revamp their team, but the fact that Genesio's been the man to orchestrate it and has done it so fantastically well. So I think this is a huge boost for Ligue and Lyon in particular. I think there'd be a genuine threat for the rest of the season on multiple fronts. So it's great to see.
Yeah, and it was a game of absolutely terrific goals. I don't think I've seen a game quite like it, really. I mean, Fekir scores a terrific free kick, and that's the goal I want to talk about in a moment. Kazawa with the excellent volley, and Depay finishes it off with an absolute screamer. It's almost like he really didn't do anything else in that game, but really hit that one excellently. But Sam, I want to talk about that Fekir goal because it really stood out to me throughout not just for the stunning goal, but also there's a question of Areola's position. There's a question of, is it Fekir just pulling out a moment of absolute genius? What side of the line do you lie now? Sam? Okay, it seems like we might have more further technical issues at the moment. So I'll throw it to you, Adam. I'm going to be absolutely honest. While I think it's very clever from Fekir, I'm a bit on the Areola's not quite positioned himself in the right position on that one.
Yeah, I think that's true. It really reminded me of the Fabio Aurelio goal in that Chelsea-Liverpool. Well, it's exactly the same, really, isn't it? In that fourth, I think it was the 4-4 game at Stamford Bridge in the Champions League. But yeah, I think Areola's just expecting a cross, and he's positioned himself accordingly, and has completely forgotten that he's left 90% of his goal completely unguarded. And Fekir's obviously seen the opportunity and executed it perfectly. The ball hits the inside of the post on its way in. He really couldn't have done much better, save for putting it in the top corner, perhaps. But so it's brilliantly executed. And although Areola is partially to blame, I think for me, I sort of lean towards the Fekir magic rather than Areola's, again, questionable positioning, and not for the first time either. But it's a fantastic goal and just a great piece of ingenuity, isn't it?
It really is. And as well as great goals, there was great talking points as well. And the one I want to focus on first, I do want to talk about the Mbappe challenge a little bit later as well, but I'll throw this one back to you, Sam, now. It seems like we've got you back. The red card and the not red card for Paris Saint-Germain. So Dani Alves was sent off, initially got booked for the challenge, continued to talk, and got himself sent off essentially talked himself into that red card. And then Marco Verratti knocks the referee, knocks it out of his hands relatively boisterously. It's not as accidental as the Marcelo one we saw earlier this season, but obviously the Dani Alves one is pretty unquestionable. But were you surprised also not to see Verratti see red as well?
I think just it happened in such a moment of madness that so much was going on. Perhaps the referee just kind of excused it. I mean, I know just watching it, I was already still trying to deal with Dani Alves and just trying to process that. And I suppose the referee, who's in the middle of it all, perhaps was in a similar sort of mindset and just kind of didn't realize exactly what Verratti had done, because surely by the letter of the law, and as you say, as we've seen this season already, he probably should have been sent off. And 9-man PSG probably wouldn't have put up the fight that 10-man PSG did. It was a very strange, just a bizarre passage of play, and Dani Alves, just, one of the most experienced players on the pitch, doing something absolutely brain dead. It's amazing.
Yeah, I never get why players talk themselves into yellow cards. I don't understand why there's not that trigger in your head going, the referee's looking at me in a certain way while I'm saying these words, and it looks like he might not be pleased with what I'm saying. I might shut my mouth a little bit and stay on the pitch, but it never seems to happen, really, does it? I want to talk about, I thought this was an interesting one, Adam, and it's the challenge on Mbappe that obviously he has to come off for. It seems like he might have still some midriff injury, and he might still be facing some effects for that for a little while. It was a strange one, really. It seems like a normal coming together when you watch it in full motion, but and in slow motion, you start to think, well, does Lopez need to be there in terms of actually fully colliding with him? He's got plenty of time to sort of dive fully away, so it's much less of an impact. And it's if you think of that kind of body check, if that was anywhere else on the pitch, that would be a free kick and possibly cards. So is this maybe... And although it's difficult for the referee, really, maybe we protect goalkeepers a little bit too much in these kind of scenarios?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. You're right in that if that collision happened anywhere else on the pitch, then it absolutely would be a free kick. And it comes down to sort of the almost unwritten rule that one, goalkeepers are protected more than perhaps they should be, and two, that in the penalty area you seem to have to do a lot more to get a foul than you do anywhere else on the pitch, which technically really shouldn't be the case. I personally, though, see this as more of an unfortunate coming together. I think it's probably a foul, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the ref gave a penalty, but I don't know that Lopez is as much intent there, or that he should be sent off or anything. I think it's coming together, and I think that he fouls him because the slow motions, you sort of see him lift his knees towards the end, which is a little bit dangerous and perhaps protecting himself a little bit. And Mbappe gets the full force of it. And when you watch it in like fast motion, and you watch that, because they showed that replay, didn't they, over and over again of the coming together, and they showed it a couple of times at full speed. It looks like an NFL like linebacker like hitting someone. It's really violent, like, because they're both going out, sprinting. And it's not surprising that Mbappe's injured. I think he's concussed was part of the issue, and obviously like his sort of ribs as well. Missed the game against missed their Coupe de France game the week against Guingamp. So it's serious enough to see him miss at least one game. There was reports he'd be out for much longer, and then Emery came out and said, he wants to play against Guingamp, and didn't in the end, probably very sensibly. But yeah, I have to agree with sentiments in that it does look like a foul, but I would sort of temper that a little bit with, I don't know that there's too much malice in Lopez's action, but it's certainly a violent one.
Yeah, and I always feel a little bit sorry for players for the attacking players in that sense, because Lopez has a decision to make of sort of maybe doing a little bit more to try and protect the opposition player, because Mbappe can't really stop in that kind of moment. It's a little bit difficult to ask him to put on the brakes when you're a Ferrari like he is. But the real talking point, at least tactically, Sam, is the midfield battle that went on, because very similar to the first game, it was Tanguy Ndombele who really controlled things. He broke up play excellently. He pulled out defence with little tricks and little movements that really bamboozled a PSG defence that's experimented with Lo Celso at defensive midfield. It's not really worked. Rabiot hasn't really worked in that position. They've brought in Lassana Diarra as well in this midweek to bolster that midfield and add some steel. That seems to be the right thing for them. That's the thing that they might be lacking at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a really smart move, assuming that he's fit and ready to go. I mean, when he joined Marseille, he hadn't been playing for a while, came in, looked really good right away. And I suppose PSG can hope for the same, because they do need someone who can free up Rabiot. I mean, Rabiot, with Lo Celso taking the more defensive role, it frees up Rabiot to play a bit more football, and that's great. And even against Lyon, you saw that he was a bit freer, and he was able to do some more of the things we know Rabiot can do, and he wasn't constrained by a fully defensive role. And if Diarra can allow a duo of Rabiot and Verratti to sort of play their best football, then it's an excellent signing. And if it slows Lo Celso's development by a little bit, but perhaps he'll learn something from him as well. It seems like a good move, and I think you're right in saying it's probably a necessary one.
I just don't feel like Lo Celso fits that defensive mold enough. It looked at times when he was playing in that Lyon game that he wanted to get more involved and be further forward. I'm not certain he's the kind of player that really wants to play in that position full time, at least anyway. More of an experiment, really, while Thiago Motta's out. Just one final bit on this excellent game, really, and it's a bit of a cheeky one, really. And you mentioned it earlier, Adam, 8-point gap. Can Lyon close that gap? Can they make it a title race?
So my initial reaction is no, but I think there's more to be said on that issue than perhaps we think at this moment in time. I mean, PSG, for most of the season, given how well they've played well and they've been by far the best team overall, and they probably think in their heart of hearts that the league is won. But 8 points isn't the sort of 20 points it was 2 seasons ago. And they'll start to focus on the Champions League, the Real Madrid game. Emery's already talking about it. I guarantee they're already thinking about it and already preparing for it. He said at the start of this year, when they came back for those 2 cup games, he's saying, we need to sort of focus on excellence now in preparation for the Real Madrid games. And assuming it's going to be extremely tight, that game, but assuming PSG do get through, then their focus is on the Champions League. Because from their point of view, if I was Nasser Al-Khelaifi, then I would take winning the Champions League over any domestic honour at any of them. And that's the way the club's been built. So it's possible that they could take their eyes off the ball in the league, rest players. We see them come under pressure in some difficult away games. I don't see them ever dropping points at home, but the game at Strasbourg, they're put under pressure, a volatile crowd. They can be flaky in those situations. And to be honest, that may come back to bite them in the Champions League too, but we've seen in these sort of games that they can drop points. And if Lyon can keep pace, keep winning their home games as well, then we may get to a sort of stage where, there's sort of 4 or 5 games to go and Lyon are in with a shout. But I still wouldn't back anybody but PSG to win the league. But I think it'll be closer than perhaps we thought to start with.
Sam, do you think there's a glimmer of hope in the sea that we've sort of had at the start of the season, where we thought PSG are absolutely running away with it and Lyon maybe clawing something back?
I'd like to think so, but I don't. It's too much of a gap. I mean, you need Lyon to be practically perfect through every single one of their next 18 games to have any real hope, because PSG, as Adam says, they won't lose at home. So that's 27 more points that they'll get, which means you need them to drop more than 8 points and Lyon to be perfect over. It's too much. It's too long. It's too big of a gap. I could see Lyon finishing closer than 8 points, closing that gap. And then, as Adam said, maybe there could be a shout there towards the end, but I think it's too much to ask of a Lyon side who have never been in this position. I mean, the mental strength it takes to win every game when you're trying to chase down a rival. PSG have been here before. Yeah, I'd like to see it, but I just don't.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit too optimistic for everyone, I think. On to managerial news, at least. It was one of the most unusual appointments, really, of the week in Bordeaux, signing Gus Poyet. The terms of his deal haven't really been released, but there was rumours that the South American was brought in to help appease the Brazilian contingent. There's also bits in French press that we've heard that Bordeaux were going for Prudhomme, who was at Club Bruges, but didn't want to pay out a 750,000 payout to the club even though he's out of contract, he's still somewhat contracted to them, and went for the cheaper option of Poyet and someone that supposedly some of the players hadn't even heard of, which will seem peculiar to English audiences at least, but I suppose he's not as big a name really in France. Sam, can you wrap your head around Poyet as manager of Bordeaux?
Not really, no. It's baffled me from the moment that I heard it. It still makes very little sense. He's had a number of opportunities as a manager, and in none of them has he shone or even really succeeded. We know him best in England from his failures with, Brighton wasn't entirely a failure, but it ended poorly, or very poorly. Sunderland as well, that was a disaster. The assistant manager job at Tottenham, that was an absolute clown car. And then to come in, it just seems he's come in because he's cheap. Because as you mentioned, they didn't want to pay for Prudhomme, or they couldn't afford him, or whatever. But this is just a guy who's never really won anything. when he was managing in Athens, he did okay. But that's one job out of 6 or 7, and that just shouldn't be enough to get you this job, this is still a good job. Bordeaux's still a very big club, very good players. If they can survive this season, there's every reason to think that the future's still bright for this club. This is a great job that a guy who doesn't really have a lot of runs on the board has somehow just snuck into.
Yeah, I still can't really believe that it happened, really, Adam. I mean, we've talked about Saint-Etienne being a club that didn't really have any direction. Now it feels like it's Ligue done, maybe making a shock move. It doesn't really make any sense. Is this possibly a step back for them, a sort of makeshift appointment to hope this maybe works and then maybe reassess in the summer?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. That's the way it struck me, given the way that Gus Poyet's career's gone. I mean, I really liked him as a player in the UK, in the Premier League, he's great. But as a manager, as Sam mentioned, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And I seem to remember him keeping Sunderland up, but then it quickly went bad the following season. The Brighton thing, as you mentioned, ended in shambles. He was at Betis for like 4 months. He was Shanghai Shenhua manager previously, and they finished 4th the previous season, and he left them in 12th in the Chinese Super League. So I'm struggling to see a success in his managerial career, as much as as he's an interesting character, and I think it has to be just a short-term fix. I really think that unless there's a time limit on that Prud'homme payout clause to Bruges, maybe they're thinking this summer he'll be the man in the summer, but Stéphane Martin, the Bordeaux president, insisted that they hesitated on Prud'homme. They weren't sure that Poyet was the man to revitalise the dressing room, and that might be the case. That he might be a short-term fix. And in the past he has had that honeymoon period has lasted relatively long amount of time, and that's what Bordeaux need. They need to stay up this season, whatever. That has to be their priority. They cannot get relegated, which is possible at the moment. Especially, I don't think they will lose Malcolm, but if they did, then they would be in genuine trouble about him and Toulon, as we talked last week about Toulon sort of being released or asked to be released and having that wish granted after Gorvanek was sacked. But it's whether Poyet is the man to unite the dressing room, which I felt Prud'homme was, and he's seen in Belgium as a good coach and a sort of a good man manager and an inspirational leader. Like his staff have gone on to coach other teams in Belgium successfully, and he felt like the man, given his experience and success with Bruges, that he could unite that dressing room. Which, given Toulon's situation and his apparent sort of being upset with the way the dressing room is at the moment with that sort of Brazilian clique, and perhaps some of the players aren't taking it as seriously as he feels they should, then they need a strong figure. And onto that in the long term, Poyet might manage that in the short term. They might stay up, but I don't see it lasting.
Yeah, it's a weird one. There was also reports that Poyet said he wouldn't take the job if they sold Malcolm, which seems like it's a good idea. I think that's the right thing to say to a club like that. But at the same time, is he the man that should be making the decisions? I mean, in a sense, it's because it's such a strange appointment, Sam. It's one of those moments of should they invest in him and in the team when they need to now, and in the players that he might bring in that we've seen in other jobs, because he's been such short term in other jobs that it might not necessarily build to a stronger future. Should they be investing in him, or should they be sort of seeing what he can do with the current crop of squad that should be doing better?
Well, I guess the thing we don't know is the interview process. I mean, presumably they spoke to him before hiring him, and perhaps he was able to outlay some sort of vision. He looked at the squad and said, I can get the best out of Malcolm, I can get the best out of the other players here. Something that convinced them. I mean, they gave him the job after all. So if they believe in him enough to give him the job, they need to back him. Obviously, they don't have a lot of money floating around because, as we said, they didn't want to pay for Prud'homme. But there's money there, and if they desperately need money, they could always sell Malcolm. Plenty of clubs will bite their hand off, give him $50 million for him, any day you like, and then they'd have money to reinvest. But it's still just such a very strange move, and maybe it'll turn out great, but it doesn't seem likely.
I still can't wrap my head around it. I think I'll be gasping until the end of time, I think, on that one. Really, I don't really get what the plan is with that. It just seems like they couldn't get anyone else. It feels like very much like the Jean-Louis Gasset at Saint-Etienne at the moment. It just feels like any man will do rather than the man that was helping us sink a little bit. But it's really worrying for a side that should be doing a lot better. And another team that have sacked their manager this week is Toulouse, who were in free fall, really. It was 8 losses in their last 11 games with just 1 win in that time. Adam, they're still in second from bottom as well. They're in real trouble of being sucked into Ligue. This was probably a move that it was mutually agreed, at least, but we kind of saw coming.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it was one that we saw coming, and I'm a little bit disappointed that Dupraz wasn't given a little bit more time. I felt that in their previous few games, the results have been terrible. You can't deny that. You said lost 8 of their last 11 league games, which is terrible. And given that they're second bottom, and they're another team that really can't get relegated. They spent 6 million on Andy Delors last season, which is a lot of money for the club like Toulouse, and they can't really get relegated. But I felt that they weren't playing too terribly. They should have. I can't believe they lost 2-0 to Saint-Etienne in that game. They were the better team in that game. The Nantes game, they got lucky, but again, they were the better team for much of the second half. You should have had that equaliser a lot sooner. Unlucky to lose in Montpellier, sorry. And it felt like that they were just getting unlucky. That they were playing a little bit better than perhaps those results suggested. And Dupraz has gone, and I can understand the reasons for that. The results were terrible, and you can't look past that. Is that in a similar case to Bordeaux? Are they able to get a manager in who's going to do anything better? Are they looking for a short-term fix, just keep them in the league? They could go for Gourvenec, and I think he's probably the most likely candidate at the moment, which would actually be a pretty good deal for all concerned, really. But yeah, you couldn't. As much as I love Dupraz, I can understand Toulouse's willingness to see him leave, and it's a shame, but perhaps necessary. I still think I've said this a lot on our podcast over the last season or so, but this season, that they just weren't creating chances. They've got no creativity. Delors isn't missing chances; he just isn't getting any. And without Oscar Trejo, without replacing him at least, then they're in trouble in that area. So sad, but perhaps necessary. I hope they find someone that can keep them in the division.
Yeah, and it's a mixture of things, really. I do quite like that idea of Gourvenec going there. That does sound like the right kind of fit for him and for the club. But you feel for Dupraz, he really inspired them for a while, but it might not just be the lack of creativity they had, but they brought in some interesting signings, at least, Sam, but they've not really worked out. I mean, Max Langradel hasn't quite hit the form that we saw at Saint-Etienne. Gianelli and Boula as well, not as good as he was in his Marseille days. The couple of jumps around the continent and maybe not have helped. Yaya Sanogo still seems like a strange one. Do you think that pinned some of the problems, and the fact that those weren't producing also put a lot of pressure on the young defence that was really the key to this team?
Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The defence and the goalkeeper, they were the key to the team, but it doesn't matter how good the back line is if everyone in front of them can't do much, can't hold the ball, can't use the ball when they have it. You can only defend for so long. You can only hold out for so long. And we've just seen more and more often guys like Diop and Julien making errors that you don't expect of them because they're just having to do so much work and they're under so much pressure constantly. And it's because the midfield in front of them, you mentioned in Bulla, you expect the Marseille in Bulla, and you just don't get that. It's the Stoke in Bulla, well, a little bit better than the Stoke in Bulla. At least he scores great goals, at least one. But they don't use the ball, they don't keep it, they don't play properly, and they just put the back line under constant pressure. And the strength of the team is only so strong, and we've seen that they make mistakes, they get unlucky because they do nothing with the ball. And that's the frustrating thing about watching Toulouse this season.
Yeah, that was the really disappointing thing I thought as well, is that we've mentioned numerous times that the Toulouse production line of the likes of Diop and Lafont, they're the two main players at least, but you add in Julien and a couple of the wing backs as well. They're the part you build around now. They're the strong defence. They've got some good, interesting midfielders as well in Blin, but they just... if they can't relieve the pressure off those players, how are young players supposed to grow? They're all going to make mistakes. Diop's made mistakes. Julian is a little bit more experienced, but it has made mistakes. Lafont, he's 18. We keep forgetting. I know he's had almost 80 games in Ligue 1, but he's 18 and he still does make mistakes, and it will happen. And we want teams like this to play players like that, but they need to have something going forward or something happening. I mean, you look at some of the teams above them that have done better this year, that they should be aiming to be better than teams like Caen, teams like Montpellier, you thought at the start of the season were nowhere near the quality level of Toulouse. You look at teams like Strasbourg, you look at Amiens, you look at Troyes, who have all been better than them this season. At parts have been less turgid, have been less just stuck for ideas, not being able to create anything really, and they've just really, really lacked it. And now they're sucked into it now. I mean, the lucky thing and a lot of teams have a lot to be thankful for, that everyone else is doing really rubbish around them. The fact that 2 wins probably sends you all the way up to 12th if other results go your way at the moment. So they're not completely stuck in the mire yet, and they don't quite have Metz breathing down their neck just yet. But it's a troublesome one. And other than Gourvenec, Sam, Adam, is there anyone else you want to throw in there? I'll pass it to you first, Adam. Gourvenec sounds like a good one, but is there anyone else you would throw your hat in the ring for?
I've seen the classic Frederic Antonetti link a few times. Given that he did a very good job when he took over at Lille, and in the short term, he took them from relegation fighting to, I think they finished 5th in that season he took over. So Toulouse would very much settle for that. A team in a similar strength of squad in a similar situation, so that might be a good short-term fix. But I think Gourvenec's perfect. His perfect timing. He's the right sort of manager for this club. I think he was dealt a very, very harsh, difficult hand at Bordeaux, and it could be just the perfect time for both club and manager. It may have even influenced the removal of Dupraz, that Gourvenec was available and very likely willing. So I'm not a huge fan of Fred Antonetti. I'm not by no means saying he should take over, but it wouldn't surprise me if they went for him. But I think it has to be Gourvenec.
Sam, do you agree with that? That sounds like the right fit, as long as Gourvenec is on board with that idea as well.
It's definitely the one that fills those of us who have a bit of an affiliation with Toulouse with a bit of hope. Gourvenec, that's an exciting move, and it seems like one that might galvanise Toulouse. But I do wonder if perhaps they might just stick with Deberve, the ex-assistant. If he can get a good result perhaps this weekend, they might stick with the hot hand. Who knows? But yes, I mean, Gourvenec would be ideal.
Yeah, it does seem the right kind of fit. I mean, there's a few weird names being thrown into the mix as well. There's rumours that Alessandro Nesta might be someone that they might even have a look at, which would be a great name, but not really someone with the greatest coaching experience, at least for the Toulouse maybe need. But you've got great young defenders. I'm pretty sure they're one of the best ever to do it. Might be able to help them a little bit. Let's talk about transfers now. I think that there's been a fair few this weekend, especially in this last sort of day or so. They've really turned on the Jets, and we mentioned Lassard Diarra being one earlier. So I will start with him, Adam. He's not played football for 6 months, but he didn't play for about a year before he played for Marseille, and he was excellent, really. He's been here, there, and everywhere. Is that a good signing for Paris Saint-Germain? They needed that kind of player, and they got him on a free. It's probably decent wages. He's well experienced. Is there any argument with that one?
No, I think it's a great signing. He wanted this move originally at Marseille, and it didn't really come about. And Marseille wouldn't let him go to PSG, and he ended up playing in the Middle East. And I think it's. I'm actually quite excited about it, given how good he was at Marseille, and at his best at Marseille, he was absolutely brilliant for them, and that can't really be understated. And it's just the perfect sort of fit for both player and for club. He's an experienced player. He's Champions League experience. He's got experience at Real Madrid and Arsenal and Chelsea, and he's proven in the league. So if Motta's injured, which he seems to be quite a lot these days, and you need him to slot in, he'll be able to do that pretty seamlessly. As you mentioned earlier, there's a big hole in that sort of, without Motta in that sort of defensive midfield role. Rabiot is good there, but doesn't like playing there. So Emery sort of caved and sort of moved him further forward. Lo Celso's playing there. And although he's a very gifted player, he's not a defensive midfielder. He's an attacking midfielder, really. And he's been sort of playing central midfield too. Disappointed with Chelsea against Lyon. I felt like he looked like he was a bit overawed, and some of his passing wasn't as confident as it has been in previous games, which, you can forgive. He's a young player and it's a position he's not used to, but I don't think he's a solution there. But I definitely think Diarra is. I think it's a really good sort of thought. It's a good idea from PSG. They don't need to spend much money on him, and he'll come in and do exactly what they need him to do.
Yeah, it's a really good signing. I mean, he's still a really quality player, and we saw how good he was at Marseille, really. So, Sam, like I say, they need kind of a linchpin, and the positive of this kind of move is he's available for the Champions League as well. If Thiago Motta's not still fit, he can be an option against his former team in Real Madrid. That's a real added bonus to this deal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of this. I think it must have been part of the consideration, because that Real Madrid midfield, I mean, obviously they're out of sorts at the moment, Real Madrid. They've just gone out of the Cup in Spain as well, and Zidane may not even make it to the PSG tie, but assuming they get there in decent shape, that midfield is a monster, and PSG can't line up with the same midfield they took to Lyon. The Chelsea would just be run right over the top. They need a big, they need someone to hold the midfield together, and Lassana Diarra, he's the kind of guy who can do it for them, and he's a big game player. He delivers. It's a great signing, and really could make a big difference in that tie. And that tie is all that club is about right now. PSG are entirely focused on beating Real Madrid, and then whoever they get in the next round. And this signing is focused on that as much as his contributions in Ligue 1.
Right, yeah, there's some really excellent signings, and I want to go through some of the big ones, really, and there's some interesting ones in the pipeline, but I will start with one that's gone through this evening, really, and that's Southampton fans will certainly want to tune their ears to this one, and that's Guido Carrillo joining their club for almost £20 million from Monaco. He's a decent player, Sam. Maybe not £20 million worth, maybe we might argue, but a target man that might give Southampton some hope with a really dismal sort of attacking record so far this season.
Well, yeah, and I think at this point, 20 million for a Premier League club, that's just not that much money. I mean, I think we're still adjusting to really that 20 million is a very average player these days in the Premier League. It just doesn't buy you perhaps what it used to. And Southampton are desperate. Their main goal scorer, Charlie Austin, is perpetually injured. You just can't really rely on him. They do look rather toothless. I mean, Gabbiadini, who looked excellent last season, he's not really the player he was. They needed a signing. And Carrillo, the good thing about him is even if he doesn't score goals, he does help players around him. At Monaco, when he did play, he often helped Falcao be Falcao, and that's something Southampton fans could look at and think, well, he can help some of our other players to deliver as well. And he doesn't necessarily come in and score 10, 15 goals by the end of the season, but he's definitely the kind of player that might just help them stay up.
Adam, what do you think? I mean, we've mentioned at times Guido Carrillo is a good footballer and has been great off the bench for Monaco this season, but is he someone who can start 15, 20 games for the season and score consistently enough in the Premier League? I mean, we might say he's built, as they might say in England, really, for the Premier League, but is he someone that's going to really propel them out of this relegation fight they find themselves in?
No, I don't think he is. I'm amazed by this signing. Who is Southampton's French scout? I mean, if you've got 20 million to spend, I wouldn't be spending it on Guido Carrillo at all. I mean, he had a purple patch for Monaco over the end of last season, perhaps, and perhaps a little bit at the early part of this season, maybe. But I don't think he's ever proved himself in Europe to be anything approaching a prolific goal scorer or the type of player that Southampton need. And you look at their squad, and I would rather have Shane Long playing up front for my team. I'd rather have Manolo Gabbiadini playing up front for my team, and I'd rather have Charlie Austin. So I don't see the point. And I think this for Southampton, I guess there must be an Argentine link with Pellegrini Pellegrino, and Korea, because he was very good at Estudiantes, I think, Independiente. I'm not sure where he played in Argentina. He's very good there, but he hasn't shown it in France. And I don't want to say it's a waste of money because it's a bit harsh, but it's not far off. And yeah, I'm as surprised as perhaps you sound, Nathan. It seems like an odd one, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that confuse me about this. One, I keep forgetting that Guido Carrillo is 26. I keep thinking he's 23, 24. The fact that he supposedly should really be in his athletic prime, he's not a consistent enough goal scorer. I like him. I like his style. I'm more of a fan of the sort of taller hold-up players, and he might be able to do that kind of job with. I'm thinking of players like Tadic and Ward-Prowse and Redmond and Boufal who like running off that kind of player. Maybe that's something they're lacking, and maybe he's something he can offer. Because we've not really seen him in a sort of 4-5-1 very often either, and that's more of what Southampton will try to play around him. But 19 million is a lot of money for him. That Monaco must be rubbing their hands together, thinking that anything they have now is worth plenty of money to anyone, really, even if they're a bench player or something like that. I mean, I can think of maybe 3 or 4 players that you might have got for a similar amount of money that might have been a better option, really, or at least a more consistent, obvious option. I mean, yeah, he was at Estudiantes beforehand, and he only scored 28 goals in almost 120 games, and it's only 15 in 65 for Monaco as well. And he's never been a good enough to be a consistent starter. Even when he's been in purple patches, they've not been good enough. He was fourth striker last season. He was 4th striker third maybe, even for Jovetic, simply because of injuries, really, that he was in there. It just doesn't strike me as the player that they need. I mean, they could even look at players in the championship or something like that are scoring goals consistently, or just look at trying to maybe build someone from even just off the top of my head. I mean, I've seen that Feyenoord are asking 20 million from Newcastle for Nikolai Jorgensen. Now, he's obviously playing in the Eredivisie, which is a bit more difficult to sort of attribute to how good he can be at the next level. But if you're looking for a target man and someone who's at least scored consistently, why don't you spend the 20 million there instead of the 20 million on what is essentially a real gamble? And this will absolutely 100% be Pellegrino's live or die move. If he hits the ground running, fantastic. If he doesn't score for the first 5 games, he might be gone before he gets the chance to really put a mark on this team at all, really. Another interesting move that might be in the pipeline, really, from France to England, Lucas Moura has been reportedly being shown around the Tottenham training facilities this evening. That's been reported by, I believe it was the Telegraph I saw it on earlier. It's an interesting move, supposedly ahead of a £22 million move. We were talking before the show, Sam, that Tottenham always seem to be trying to fill that right wing role. Is Lucas the man to do that?
This is a really, really strange move for Tottenham. Lucas has definite qualities, but he just doesn't really seem to fit in at all with what Pochettino is trying to do. He doesn't have the sort of the physicality that most Pochettino players have. I mean, one of Pochettino's favourite players is Lamela, who has similar abilities with the ball, but so much fight without it. He's a scrapper. He kicks people. He's almost a thug, and Pochettino loves him. And Lucas Moura is just so not that. And the rumors at the same time that Lucas Moura would be coming in and that Lamela would be sold back to Italy. I mean, that just makes no sense. And look, Lucas is definitely, he has qualities and he has the pace that Tottenham don't have. So that on that basis alone, it does make some sense. The Spurs would get a bloke. They don't have that pace. They don't have that directness. Maybe someone who can perhaps help take some of the pressure off Harry Kane, distract defenses, something like that. But it's a strange one. I mean, he's not going to be eligible for the Champions League, I don't think. So, it's only for the Premier League. He's going to take time to adjust. We know he's not played a lot of football either. He's not going to have the fitness that Pochettino players need. He's not going to know Pochettino's very specific, very sort of complex system. It's a really strange signing. I really don't understand it.
Yeah, and Adam, do you think that he seems like a different mold to some of the other attackers? I mean, we're thinking of Heung-min Son, who's maybe more of a almost pseudo striker. Dele Alli's more of a number 10, as is Eriksen. Lamela's coming back into the fold. He's maybe more of a winger. Maybe Lucas gives them a different option in those attacking areas, but is he really going to get the consistent game time he's really searching for after leaving PSG?
No, to answer that part of the question, I don't think he is going to get consistent game time that he's after. But he's going to get more game time than he is at PSG at the moment. When you look at Spurs' team, he's got so much to compete with in that sort of attacking areas. Obviously, no one's moving Harry Kane, Dele Alli, Christian Eriksen, Son, Lamella, even Sissoko. Yeah, you'd hope he'd be above Sissoko in the pecking order, but he's not going to be first choice by any means. Obviously, Spurs are going to have a lot of games in the second half of the season, so he'll obviously get the game time that he needs. But as a permanent move, I'm surprised that this is the type of thing that he's interested in. Yes, Spurs are a good club, and Pochettino's a great manager. But it does seem from his point of view like he's going to have to do quite a lot to force his way into the team. On Lucas himself, I am well aware of Sam's opinion, and it's quite common that Lucas perhaps isn't the player of PSG standard or the high or sort of a Champions League team standard, and it's something that I personally feel may not necessarily be true. If you look at PSG's last season, Lucas was their second top goal scorer. He got 19 goals in all competitions, only second to Cavani, and got 11 assists, which is their second top assist provider behind Di Maria, got 15. So he's involved directly in 30 goals in 53 games. And for me, I know that he perhaps hasn't been first choice, and he doesn't always, stand out. But I always feel like he offered something different, and he always had an impact when he came off the bench and when he started for PSG. Whether he was first choice or not, whether he was in favour or not, I felt like he impacted the game. So although he's been out of favour completely this season, you imagine that he would do a similar thing for Spurs. And in the Premier League, he's going to get a little bit more space to run at people. Fullbacks are going to get forward like they don't really in France. And he's a very talented player. And I think this could be a really good signing for Spurs, that he could be an impact sub, or he could ably cover Heung-min Son or Eriksen or any of their sort of forward players, Harry Kane aside, obviously, if should they get injured or later in games or later in the season. But I don't think that he'll be happy, because I think he thinks he should be playing first choice for a Champions League team, and I don't think he'll get that. But for Spurs, I think it's actually quite a good signing to add to that front line, because I like Lucas. I've always liked him watching PSG play, and I feel like he's capable of changing games.
Yeah, it feels like it's a bit of a strange sort of traffic movement, if that's maybe the best way to put it, in the sense that for Lucas, it's probably not really the right move for him. He's not going to get the game time he wants. He's maybe not going to get necessarily the position he wants to play in. At the same time, he's not going to get that guaranteed game time, even if players left. That Tottenham are a side that probably look for extra players to come in as well. It just doesn't feel quite right. It'd be great for them, I think, to add to depth, because that's really what they're looking for from this kind of signing. And that's unfortunately probably not what Lucas is really understanding from the deal itself. Let's talk about some interesting moves that have happened in Ligue, and there's some really interesting ones for Saint-Etienne. I'm just looking at the transfer list from the Ligue website, and obviously there's the great loan deal for Ntep, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But also there's news that they've got Neven Subotic from Borussia Dortmund, a very experienced defender and a player they need. And they've also lost Lois Diony, who's gone to Bristol City on loan. And we'll start with him, Sam. It was a bit disappointing, really, his season so far. It's never really clicked at Ligue. And we all expected a lot from him, really. He was a player that we thought was well sought after in Liga. A move to Bristol City, as many French strikers have done. Farama Diédhiou, Codger as well. It's an interesting move and possibly a profitable one if he can rediscover his form, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he gets to go and play in a promotion chase. They're Bristol are not far off the promotion places. They're in the playoff places at the moment, a couple of points from direct promotion. I mean, he gets to go play in that fun. So it's going to be a lot different to what he's been enjoying most of this season. Change obviously will do him some good, because it's just not really worked out for him there, but it seemed like a pretty good deal for everyone involved. And as you say, if he can succeed, do well, it's a profitable move for everyone as well.
Yeah, and talking about the other moves that Lever have done, Adam. I mean, Untep's a really good, positive player that likes to play on the in the final third. It's never really worked out at Wolfsburg for one reason or another, but has excelled in Ligue 1 before. And a player like Subotic, he might not quite be as good as he was a couple of years, well, even 5 years ago. Really, injuries have really curtailed his career. But adding him to the likes of Perrin and Pogba, they've got a little bit more experience in that back line that might just help tip this balance they have at the moment of not really being able to do anything really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I think they're all really interesting signings, and the type of thing that Saint-Etienne need is to add a bit more verve to their squad, which is, as I often sort of moan about, that it's a very uninspiring midfield in particular, but an uninspiring team. And Gautes somehow got the best out of that team for 7, 8, 9 season. Subotic is a signing I really like. He's still 29. He's fallen completely out of favour at Dortmund. And I admit I haven't seen him much in the last few seasons. And obviously he's been overtaken by Socrates and Mark Bartra and players like that, and Toprak too in their team. But for a club like Saint-Etienne, in the situation they are, given the experience he has, the quality he's shown in the past, he's a really, really nice signing. And they've struggled for so many years to find a partner for Loic Perrin. I know Mustafa Bow was one that was relatively significant a few seasons ago before he left, but since then definitely they've really struggled to find Perrin a good partner, and Subotic could be that man. Between them they have absolutely no pace. That's a huge issue that they'll probably come across pretty quickly, but there's experience and defensive nous that he's up there, so that's a really great signing. And Tep, if he can recapture his Rennes form, is a huge signing for Saint-Etienne. I know he struggled with injuries, and perhaps that's maybe robbed him of the pace that he showed at Rennes, and that sort of verve he so wonderfully imposed on Ligue and sides, and was brilliant for Rennes. Was close to move to Liverpool at one point. He could be a brilliant signing, but again, as you said, it's never really worked out at Wolfsburg. And potentially, Jan V is a good signing. He's an experienced player. He's a talented player. Obviously, attitude problems in the past, but overall, they're sort of adding to their spine, which has been Perrin and Rufio's sign has been severely lacking. So they're going in the right direction at least. So hopefully they'll be the three players that will help them drag themselves out of this absolute mess they're in this season.
Yeah, and just looking at some of the rumours that have been going around as well, and Basel was supposedly looking at Leo Lacroix from Saint-Etienne, and they must be like, please take him off our hands at the moment. Really, he's been pretty awful this season, is maybe the nice way of putting it. We'll go for one really interesting signing before going on a brief rumour that I've just spotted from our own Twitter account as well. That's come from Di Marzio earlier today. So we'll go with the low-key one at the moment, and that's Nice shifting out more midfielders, at least in Remy Valter going to Troyes on loan for the rest of the season. Sam, it's an interesting one. His career was pretty good under Favre last season. He played quite a number of games, but it's stalled quite a bit this season. This is a great chance for him to really get back on the horse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he just needed a move. He needed to go somewhere he was going to play. This season, I mean, it's not been a disaster because he's barely kicked a football, so you can't really call that a disaster. It's just something else. It's just been a waste. This is a guy who's young. He needs to play, and as you said, last season played a lot. Nice, good season with him in the side. This season played one game in the league. His career is stalling, and it's great that the club have been good enough to say, well, look, go out on loan, play, and we'll see where you end up at the end of the season, because this is 6 months wasted in a 22-year-old's career. It's not great. So go play for Troyes. Excellent. Great for everybody involved.
And the final one, and I'll get you both to talk about this quickly, is supposedly PSG have been receiving offers between 25 million euros and 40 million euros from Liverpool and Tottenham for Javier Pastore. Supposedly Inter were very much front runners in that, and he obviously cried coming off the pitch before the winter break, thinking that he was going to go. And it's strange that the player seems to have turned down the moves rather than the club. Adam, do you understand why he maybe turns down a move to Liverpool or Tottenham? I mean, he's had his injury problems over the last couple of years at least, but he's a very talented player, and arguably in those kind of sides has a chance of starting regularly.
Yeah, I'm surprised he has turned them down. I love Pastore. I think he's on his day unbelievably good, and would fit right in at Liverpool in particular. Spurs perhaps less so, but again he'd be very, very useful for them. I think this may have something to do with his wife may have very recently given birth, and there are a few PSG players that have recently had children, and they're not keen. This is part of the reason they might be struggling to shift some of their forwards, is because they're settled in France and they're settled in Paris, and having recently had a child, that them and their partners don't want to leave. And I'm fairly sure Pastore is one of them, so that may have something to do with it. But in sheer footballing terms, it would be a great signing for both those teams. And for Pastore, he for me, I'd start him at Liverpool, and he wouldn't be far off the Spurs team either. And he'd have an impact on their Premier League. He's an unbelievably talented player, and so I'm surprised that he hasn't moved to one of those teams. It sounds like a good fit.
Yeah, good to get there, Adam, knowing the wag talk that we all need on this program, at least anyway. Sam, what do you think? I mean, the move to Inter seemed to be like the one really that was nailed on throughout the winter period, really, and Liverpool and Tottenham have come in late. You think Liverpool are possibly losing Chan? They've already lost Coutinho. Maybe he's someone that could fit in nicely there. Does it seem strange for you as well that he's maybe turned down moves to what he'd probably be on the same kind of wages? He still should be able to get Champions League football at both those clubs. It seems like maybe he's, like you're saying, maybe one of these players that are ready to stay pat and wait for the right kind of move that they feel.
Well, the rumours that I read earlier today were that he's dead keen on Inter, and that's where he wants to go, and he's settled on that project. He believes in that as the move, and if that's the case, then that would at least explain turning down two pretty good clubs for him to go to. I mean, as Adams sort of mentioned, he'd be a great player for either of them. I mean, Spurs are desperate for someone other than Christian Eriksen who can actually make something happen with the ball at his feet, and that's perfect description of Javier Pastore. He makes things happen with the ball at his feet. I mean, he'd be great for Spurs, and as you said, Liverpool too. There is a gap there for a player just like him. He'd fit right into that system. He's your Coutinho understudy, if you like. I mean, Coutinho's gone, but Coutinho replacement almost. He'd be great for both of them. So whether it's the wag and the baby, or it's he wants to join Inter, I mean, there must be a reason for it. But if those bids are real and he's really turned them both down, that is surprising, because they'd both be excellent fits for him. And working under Pochettino, that would probably be his best chance of getting into the Argentina squad for the World Cup. And you've got to think like, well, if he doesn't move, he doesn't play, he won't go to the World Cup.
That's the worry for him, isn't it? I think the one positive from the other side of this, of him turning them down, is I do worry that he's had so many injuries recently, and we always hear about it, the Premier League being a more physical, quote unquote, league. It's maybe for the best, maybe that he's not coming into the Premier League midway through a season with his injury history, maybe with being that kind of flair player, getting beaten by the likes of Gareth Barry on a weekend when he's there at West Brom or something like that. I think he'll probably be happy to stay pat and enjoy maybe until the summer, or if Inter are ready to step up their interest fully and grab him in the winter and maybe have a more Mediterranean climate is maybe the nice way to describe it, at least. That's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Adam, Sam, and all of you listening at home. Join us for the main show again next week. It won't be delayed, hopefully. Our technical issues seem to be resolved. So we'll be back at the same time, same place on next Monday. A bientôt and goodbye.